From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin tonight with the Bush administration trying to maneuver its Persian Gulf policy through two of the world's most influential political institutions, the Congress and the United Nations Security Council. The administration is trying to hold off anxious members of Congress while it gets the Security Council to approve a policy of force against Iraq if the Iraqis do not leave Kuwait by sometime in January. Here's our national security correspondent, John McQueffey.
Though there were many questions about whether President Bush is pushing the U.S. too rapidly toward war, the powerful Democratic chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee may have narrowed his differences with the president. Sam Nunn, who had expressed strong reservations about administration strategy, today appeared to give it a limited endorsement.
The question is, I view it as not whether military action is justified. I believe it is. The question is whether military action is wise at this time and in our own national interest.
Today's witness, former Defense Secretary James Schlesinger, said he thinks sanctions could work against Iraq, but it would take a year. The White House is refusing to let any current cabinet officers testify until after the United Nations vote later this week. Senators complain bitterly that getting a UN resolution authorizing use of force against Iraq is not a substitute for getting a declaration of war from the U.S. Congress. In New York, the UN Security Council now appears ready to pass overwhelmingly such a use of force resolution. The French and Soviets say they will vote for it as long as the U.S. is willing to delay from January 1st to the 15th, the deadline by which Iraqi troops must withdraw from Kuwait. That's an easy compromise for the U.S. since American troops will not be at maximum strength until well after mid-January. Soviet leader Gorbachev today said his meeting with Iraqi Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz ended in, quote, a cold way with increased lack of understanding. Gorbachev told the Iraqi that the Soviet Union would not back down. In fact, the Soviets are actively lobbying for the UN resolution, but are doing so quietly. They reportedly played a critical role in bringing the Chinese on board and have now dispatched an emissary to Cuba, where changing minds could be a lot tougher. John McQueffey, ABC News, the State Department.
One other note, after he casts his vote at the UN, the Chinese foreign minister will visit Washington. The first visit by a senior Chinese official since the crackdown in Tiananmen Square last year. The State Department says there is no connection between the vote and the visit. The commander of U.S. naval forces in the Gulf said today the naval embargo on Iraq has been nearly 100% effective. Admiral William Fogarty said that more than 4,000 ships have been challenged and 500 of them boarded since the blockade began. Once again, Saddam Hussein apparently will allow a few more hostages to go. The former boxing champion Muhammad Ali, who is in Iraq, says he has been told that when he leaves, he will be allowed to take a number of Americans with him. No word on precisely how many. At the United Nations today, another step in the effort to build support for a Security Council resolution permitting force against Iraq. This time it came in testimony from a group of Kuwaitis who reportedly escaped their homeland after the Iraqi invasion. They came to the UN today to charge Iraq with torture and brutality. ABC's David Ensor is at the United Nations.
The goal of the testimony was to convince the UN Security Council that ending the Iraqi occupation of Kuwait is about more than oil. It is also about human rights.
Under my supervision, 120 newborn babies were buried the second week of the invasion.
The carefully managed presentation by the Kuwaiti government in exile included eyewitness testimony, still pictures, and videotape. A nurse spoke of treating a mentally handicapped girl who had been repeatedly raped by Iraqi soldiers.
She was hemorrhaging, her lip was bruised and bleeding. She was just crying, and she had no idea what happened to her. Really, I can't forget her face.
While we have gathered in this chamber in Kuwait, the sun has set and another night of terror is about to begin.
Today's presentation does not appear to have changed the minds of those few Security Council members opposed to a resolution authorizing force against Iraq. Cuba, for one, says it will still vote no. David Ensor, ABC News at the United Nations.
Disagreement and confusion again today about Iraq's nuclear program. Inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency who were in Iraq last week said today they found no evidence that Iraq has diverted any nuclear material from its civilian research program to military use. In Mexico today, the Deputy Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleberger said he believes that Iraq has hidden nuclear materials from the inspectors, but another administration official tells ABC News that recent statements in this regard from the administration are not supported by the facts. Once again, the crisis in the Gulf is apparently having an effect on Israel, or at least events there are given by many Israelis as the cause for a sharp increase in the number of attempted guerrilla attacks against Israeli targets. 5 Israeli soldiers were killed today in southern Lebanon when they intercepted a group of Palestinians allegedly headed for Israel. 2 of the Palestinians were also killed. Here's ABC's Dean Reynolds.
Israeli forces illuminated the sky overnight in pursuit of 2 Palestinian gunmen who disappeared into the hills. The morning light revealed 2 others who did not. A familiar scene in the part of southern Lebanon which the Israelis claim as their security zone.
It's happened last week, it's happened last month, it's happened 2-3 months ago, and it will happen the next day, maybe, next night.
For a long time, Israel enjoyed spectacular success in ambushing hit squads coming across the border, and did it without losing Israeli lives. But November has been a different story. 11 Israeli soldiers have been shot to death along 3 borders, with Lebanon, Jordan, and even with Egypt. More deaths in this 1 month than in the previous 10.
We are faced with a wave of extremism, fundamentalism in the Arab world, which was encouraged by the Gulf crisis, by Saddam Hussein.
And in fact, the gunmen killed overnight were members of a Palestinian faction headed by George Habash, a strong supporter of Saddam Hussein. Israelis suggest that many of the attacks are aimed at provoking them to retaliate strongly. So strongly that Arab support for the American-led coalition against Iraq would be shattered. Dean Reynolds, ABC News, Tel Aviv.
When we come back, a new British Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher's choice, John Major, replaces her. Does free trade with Mexico translate into fewer jobs at home? We'll have a report on that. And virtual reality, it could put you inside your computer.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Presto Salad Shooter.